Film lovers all over the world are still mourning over the death of legendary director David Lynch, who passed away on January 15th. I'm a fan of Lynch and his works ever since I was in high school, and this is probably dating me, when this new film everyone was talking about had just been released, Mulholland Drive. I was really taken with the dreamlike, enigmatic mystery, and of course had to seek out his other movies after that. All have their own unique qualities and are true gifts that he has left this world. He'll be dearly missed. While Lynch isn't directly involved with the Alien series of films, there are some tangential connections and an apparent unexpected feud of sorts with none other than Alien designer H.R. Giger. That's what I wanted to cover in today's video. Of course, the biggest film that links David Lynch into the world of Alien is Dune, the 1984 adaptation of Frank Herbert's beloved novel. It had long been a struggle to get a translation of this book onto the big screen, and before Lynch's film, the closest anyone had come was Alejandro Jodorowsky. This was an infamous film that never came to be, subject of the fascinating documentary Jodorowsky's Dune. Alien writer Dan O'Bannon was involved in the pre-production stages, as was H.R. Giger. Though that version of Dune fell through, O'Bannon never forgot Giger's contributions and fought passionately to have him become involved with Alien. Many of Giger's Dune concepts were altered and transformed into certain aspects of Alien, and the rest is history. Another interesting connection is that once producer Dino De Laurentiis was finally beginning to get an adaptation of Dune made in the early 1980s, he first approached Ridley Scott to direct. Hot off the success of Alien, Scott seemed like the ideal director, and he was even involved in the scripting stages, stating that he had a, quote, pretty fucking good, end quote, screenplay written by Rudy Wurlitzer. Scott stepped down from directing after some disputes with De Laurentiis, and eventually it was David Lynch who took on the task as director. Lynch's Dune, you may know, was a very troubled production, rivaling the hardships of even David Fincher on Alien 3, and Lynch has made his dissatisfaction with how things went and how the film turned out well known. On a personal note, I think the 1984 version of Dune is quite good. Lynch's style and sensibilities still shine through, and there are many impressive factors to the production. There's a good amount of it I even prefer to the newer, highly praised version of Dune from Denis Villeneuve. But with all of Dune and its connections to Alien in mind, the supposed and seemingly one-sided feud between Giger and Lynch can be traced back to Lynch's very first film, Eraserhead. Now, if you haven't seen Eraserhead, I don't really know how to describe it. And, well, if you have seen it, you probably don't know how to describe it either. But it was a very little movie that became a very big deal. Obviously, it signified David Lynch as a director to watch, one with a bold and strange vision. A strange movie it certainly is, but in the most wonderful way. Also very dreamlike, very surreal, moody, and truly frightening in ways that unnerve and unsettle rather than shock. One of the most talked about aspects of Eraserhead is the baby, commonly referred to as the Eraserhead baby. The main character, Henry, is told his girlfriend gave birth to the baby and he is the father. He has to take care of it, but this thing does not seem to be human. It is always crying, and this drives Henry to the edge. David Lynch quite famously never spoke about the Eraserhead baby. He remained tight-lipped about its significance and meaning, and was very vague about how the special effects were achieved in order to bring it to the screen. The most widely held and accepted belief is that it was somehow created using the embalmed fetus of a calf. A disturbing effect, a very memorable creature, and the root of what ultimately had Lynch upset with Giger. In 1988, Giger sat down for an interview with Cinefantastique magazine for a special issue covering all of the projects he had been involved with up to that point. Inevitably, the subject of Dune came up. He was asked why he was not involved with David Lynch's film. Here's what he had to say. I was very eager to be. Through friends, I asked Lynch if he was interested in my cooperation. I never heard from him. Later, I came to know that he was upset because he thought we copied the chestburster in Alien from his monster baby in Eraserhead, which was not so. Ridley Scott and I hadn't even seen that film at that time. If one film influenced Alien, it was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I would have loved to collaborate with Lynch on Dune, but apparently he wanted to do all the designs by himself. I think he did a great job. I admire Lynch tremendously. I think he's one of the greatest filmmakers, and I would very much like to work with him sometime. Giger is very candid in this interview and certainly doesn't provide the usual Hollywood lip service. In the previous question, for example, he gave some answers regarding his involvement with designing a monster for Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, The resulting effect he refers to as Shiza. So I think we can take his answers as honest and sincere. It also says a lot that he ultimately praises Lynch's Dune, which, especially at this time, wasn't exactly the trendy thing to do. And it speaks to his admiration of Lynch as a filmmaker that he still wishes he could have been involved, regardless of the ultimate reception Dune received. But it should be kept in mind that his comments regarding the chestburster and the Eraserhead baby are taken from second-hand accounts. Lynch did not tell him directly. Lynch definitely never publicly spoke about it, so he's taking this unnamed third party at their word. Your guess is as good as mine as to whether or not Lynch actually felt this way, and if it was the reason for not inviting Giger to participate in his version of Dune. Now, when we look at these creatures side by side and compare them, it does seem like a little bit of a stretch, doesn't it? Of course, they are both monster babies of roughly the same size, and I guess similar texture, but that might be where it ends. The Eraserhead baby has eyes, no teeth, and cries like a human baby, while the chestburster has no eyes, sharp fangs, and a monstrous little shriek. The Eraserhead baby is bulbous, almost bowling ball shaped, while the chestburster is narrow and worm-like. Perhaps the closest they look to being similar is very early on in Eraserhead, where one could interpret the baby appearing as worm-like, though maybe more accurately sperm-like. There's also a little bit towards the end that could be up for comparison. Both of these creatures eventually grow into something even more large and terrifying, but the Eraserhead baby is essentially a larger version of what it once was. The chestburster, on the other hand, of course, grows into the classic alien design from Giger that we all know very well. And there is an important point that Giger leaves out of his defense, and I'm curious as to why he didn't touch on it in this interview. The full-grown adult alien is undisputedly Giger's work and design, but he didn't actually design the chestburster, at least not as we know it in the final film. Giger has been on record many times as saying that when it came to designing the chestburster, he took inspiration from the Irish painter Francis Bacon. In particular, the work 3 Studies for Figures at the Base of a Crucifixion. Giger's resulting concept art, while quite stunning and scary in its own right, most definitely does not reflect the monster that ultimately erupts from John Hurt's chest. Should anyone receive the most credit for the design of the chestburster and how it looks in the final film, then that would have to be the special effects artist Roger Dickon. Initially, Dickon did make attempts to follow through with Giger's concept art that didn't really work out too well. Reportedly, there were clashes between the two, so maybe that's why Giger doesn't mention him all these years later in the interview. Throughout the process of designing the facehugger, it went through many different stages, including one with bulging eyes, which maybe looked a little more similar to the Eraserhead baby. Overall, designing the chestburster became quite the struggle, as outlined succinctly in J.W. Rinsler's book, The Making of Alien. Here's an excerpt. When it burst out, I wanted it to look very rude and totally carnivorous, Scott went on. I also wanted a biological link between the baby, which is what we were really designing, and the final creature. So we went back and re-examined various illustrations and ideas and tried to come up with something. I also wanted it to be a very smooth object. Ridley ran over to Roger's house one day to have a look at it, O'Bannon recalled. It had a head that was pretty much a miniature version of the big one, and kind of an elaborate body with little dinosaur legs. It was just in clay, and Ridley looked over it a bit and then reached out and pulled off the legs. Then he wadded up little pieces of clay for dolphin flippers and stuck them on either side behind the head, and said, "There, that's it." The chestburster had been reduced to head and tail. It was a combination of ideas from one of Giger's drawings, Dickon said, and Ridley Scott's ideas and mine as I built it. Ridley decided the chestburster should look something like the Giger drawing with the elongated head. I made it breathe by installing gills and a chest that was inflated up and down. Scott would recall sitting with Dickon as he did it. Because the large alien had metallic teeth, Dickon supplied chromium dentures for the Phase 2 monster. To be honest, the beast was very much the product of several people, Scott summed up. Giger and Dickon and me, and even a bit of Gordon Carroll. But one must give Roger credit for a marvelous job. So, multiple people contributed to how the design of the chestburster came out, with Ridley Scott having the final say on what would actually appear in front of the camera. Scott has always been pretty open about the films that inspired Alien. As previously mentioned in the Giger interview, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a very strong influence, and Scott has always praised George Lucas's Star Wars, citing it as a key inspiration for Alien. If Eraserhead drew inspiration, it's never been mentioned, and seemingly less likely due to all those who contributed to the design, at least not consciously. It's always possible that maybe Ridley Scott did see Eraserhead at some point, and maybe it was in the back of his mind when giving the final say on the chestburster. While Eraserhead was initially released in 1977, premiering in film festivals in the United States and France, its prominence was slow to grow. Screenings for the general public didn't really take place until February of 1978, and it was first marketed as a midnight movie, playing alongside other off-kilter features such as John Waters' Pink Flamingos. Very gradually, its reputation grew, as did its potential for a wider release. The film wouldn't get a release in the UK until March 29, 1979, well after Alien's production. Thanks to the incredible detail of accounting the making of Alien in Rinsler's book, we can even know the exact date the chestburster scene was filmed, August 4th, 1978. It's still entirely possible that Ridley Scott may have been in the United States before the production, during the midnight movie era of Eraserhead. Other well-known directors and producers discovered it during this time, including Mel Brooks, who would later hire Lynch to direct The Elephant Man, and Stanley Kubrick, who was enamored with the film and brought influence of it into The Shining. So I wouldn't say it's completely out of the realm of possibility, despite Giger's claims. It's just that it doesn't seem likely. It probably was just a coincidence, and unfortunately David Lynch reportedly felt otherwise. But what do you think? Do you see the similarities? Could the Eraserhead baby have influenced the chestburster in some way? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, I'm curious to hear from you what your favorite David Lynch films are, so let me know that as well. For me, and not necessarily in order, I love Mulholland Drive, The Elephant Man, and most definitely Eraserhead. Regardless of this one specific case where possibly Eraserhead and Alien may have been linked, his influence in film as a whole is undeniable. You can look at his films and his attitude toward filmmaking and truly understand that this man was not just a filmmaker, but an artist, and his films were works of art. Engaging, provocative, open to limitless interpretation, allowing the audience to take from it what they bring into it, and hopefully also take something new out. Everything great art should be. That's something, unfortunately, that's increasingly rare when it comes to film. Looking back on his incredible career, it's such a miracle that his work was able to reach the mainstream the way it did, and I really don't think we'll ever have another filmmaker quite like David Lynch ever again. I can't believe that he's now gone. He was a fantastic artist, and I'll truly miss him. I know I'm not alone in feeling that way. Goodbye, David, and thank you. As always, I very much appreciate you watching today's video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed it, and be sure to subscribe if you want to keep up with the latest videos from the channel. My very special thanks goes out today to Brandon James, Xeno Shadowmorph, and Xenozip, Queen Tiers of the Patreon Hive. Thank you to Gregory Ford and John Griggs, the Hive's Praetorians. And a very special thanks to Lady Anne in the Ellen Ripley Tier of Excellence. Finally, a very big thank you to Nicholas Butta and Frank, the Alien Theory Weyland-Yutani executives. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for further information. In the meantime, you can follow me on social media. Follow @alien_theory on X, formerly Twitter. Follow @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.